should be lovely. Myself. Oh, spiff and spiffy here. The expand works again for those of you who like using that. And by the way, when you're using this, I'd like some feedback at some point. What I'm thinking about doing with this expand over the summer is turning it really into a work area, meaning break it up into 6 places that you could drag and drop the video and say, take these 2, drag and drop the editor, say, put it over here, and then resources, put them over here. So like when you're working, you're watching the video, you can kind of over here, put a little, like little iframe where you're like, you're kind of watching a video and playing with the code and you're like, should I forget what that function is? And you can type it in and it'll go out and grab, you know, results, but keep you all in one place while you're working. That's my goal. And so any of you that would like, you can request to fork this in GitHub if anybody wants to try playing with making contributions to this application that I'm building. It is, there's a phone app you can download now of IOP and things like that. So anybody's interested in like just trying to play with it for shits and giggles, I'm more than happy to let you fork off it. So we'll be doing that. I'm gonna put that in its own window, in its own tab, so I can just go ahead, screen it like that, and then I can alt tab to my other places that I want to go to, such as we'll be discussing 402 and 403 this evening, because we've got to get assignments rolling again in here. To be completely 100% honest with you, I've been very disheartened by the lack of effort, and therefore right, wrong, or indifferent, transparent, and honest. I've been focusing on some catching up some other classes than in here, right? And it's not like a mean or whatever. It's just I have to put my effort somewhere, and if I have people that are 4 weeks behind in assignments, me putting a 5th assignment out kind of it makes no sense. Makes absolutely no sense when I could be keeping another class rolling, kind of thing, so to speak. So anyway. I'm going to ask the same question I asked last week. Hopefully we have a different answer. How many of you got to watch any of the videos? So we got one more this week. That's kind of what I'm talking about. Wow. All right, so let's have a conversation on context. What do I mean by context? Can anybody answer that? I gotta tell you, the sad part is these assignments with the videos are pretty freaking light. I mean, there's nothing to them. And they're principle and foundation to everything you can learn in JavaScript. And without the principles and the foundation, you're just learning syntax, right? That's what it comes down to. All right.
Talking context as in like execution.
Execution context.
Context.
Right. Go ahead, Don.
Yeah, context is the object that the function belongs to.
Say that again.
It's the object a function belongs to.
Okay, so context is the object that a function belongs to. That's not wrong. That's right. It's not fully right though. Right? Anyone else want to give it a try? And Don, that was good, right? I'm not shooting you down. I'm not shooting you out of the water there. That was good. I'm just looking for something a little fuller. Fair?
Totally fair.
So context, Don gave us an example of, I would say that's an example of context. Context is something a function belongs to, correct? That's his example there. Anyone want to follow up with that?
So execution context is similar to scope in that it kind of splits the code blocks and only operates within that code block.
So why would let me ask this, yes. Let me ask this, why would I harp on this so much? Why would I want to talk about this so much that I want to, it's like beating a dead horse, right? How many of you actually understand it yet? To beat the dead horse, right? It's a good video, isn't it? It's a great learning video, isn't it? Like his video series.
Yeah, very short.
Right, it's very short.
You're saying something about like it's like you have these like weird parts to it, like the JavaScript, but like you learn those like the basics like variables and functions, you pretty much like build. It's like Legos. Like you have just like those basic building blocks, and you can pretty much.
But whatever you want.
Yeah.
Right. And that's just it. And it's not really asking you to write code or to pay attention to syntax or to technical, right? It's asking you. He's explaining these concepts that, ironically, you could walk through eBay and walk up to some developers and say to them, "What's the execution context?" And there's a handful in there that won't know. So the point there is, the great developers, we walk up and say to them what it is, they'll turn around and say a pain in the ass, or whatever, right? But the point is that they're great because they get what they're doing. There are people who catch alligators and milk poisonous snakes their whole life and never learned the secret recipe to how to handle a snake or an alligator or whatever, and they might do it for 20 years. Sooner or later, they get bit pretty hard, or their life or their job is just hard. But those who learn how to do what's called like tail a snake, right, and they understand the basic concepts of tailing a snake, they're the ones that'll pick up an Eastern brown or a cobra by the tail and confidently be okay, because they have those couple little concepts down, right? Well, that's really what we're trying to, if I can't get anything else into your heads by the time you're done in this class, if I can get execution context into your head and how that works, I've gotten into your head what a variable is, how a variable works, how to use a variable, what a function is, how a function works, right? And I've also reduced your opportunity for error by 80% in doing JavaScript, right? So it gets really interesting when we talk about it, and I'm going to step out into and just use Inspector for a minute. It gets really interesting when we talk about it. I'm going to flip back and forth from Inspector here to there. I really don't care what page is over there. I'm not doing a page. So we have execution context. And then somebody finish my sentence. Lexical
Environment
is what?
Another similar concept to scope and execution context, but lexical environment refers to where statements exist in scope of in the execution context. So where, for instance, a let is a thing as to it not existing, as to getting a reference here.
Okay.
Short story long.
Right. So lexical, right, environment is how things get put into, let me ask you this, the way you write your code, is that your lexical environment?
You don't have any functions.
Oh, that's a fair question. Right? That's a good, that's a good answer. I didn't even think about that. You're right. Right. Just because you write your code in a certain way doesn't mean that's the way that it's going to sit in memory. Right. But ironically, out of the other side of my mouth, I'll say the way you write your code can, right, very much so establish how it's going to be your memory. So what is context? Because we're about to explore something that you will use over and over and over again if you're going to be a developer, if you're going to write JavaScript. We're about to dip into one thing that is a mystery to a lot of people who have been doing it for a few years, and if they only took an hour to freaking learn, it wouldn't be a mystery. Anybody know what we use? What some people actually, it's a keyword that people refer to context as. I come in here. Actually, I don't even have to jam it up like this. We're not really working on a page. So why don't I just full screen this? And you're welcome to do this. Open up your console and full screen it if you want. At the moment, right, I'm sitting here and if I were to type window, hit enter, essentially what am I looking at when I type window and hit enter? What am I in? Let's start there. Sorry. Let's start. Where am I at? As far as execution context goes and things like that, where am I at?
The bomb?
You could say that. Guess what I'm looking for is I'm in the outermost, right? I have reached the edge of space. I can't get out of here. Sure, I could, right? But no, I can't. Browsers are contain JavaScript within the window itself. And therefore, when you get to the window, to the edge of the window, you're done. Meaning you have no more space. And so therefore, we would call this area that we're in what?
Is it the global object?
Thank you. The global space, right? So one point to take in, understand, and it should help you as you move forward is this. How many global spaces are there? One.
How many windows you have open?
One. I'm gonna smack him one of these days. Smart ass. You're right, Don, but then we're talking about another space, right? We're not talking about the space we're in.
Right, right. You have one area that you're working in, but you could have multiple global open, right?
Right. Correct. So in my global space, the keyword this always refers to our context. So if I put this and hit enter, what should I say?
Whatever you call.
You should see win.
Yeah. Right. I'm in my global space. This is referring to where I am, so to speak. Correct. Just like if I said, that's the only thing I don't like working in console. Oh, good. It let me do if you hit enter for a return, you're done. Let's do it this way. Let's just start here. Function.
Your I and your T are mixed up in function.
Thank you. then console log this inside the function. Somehow, we're still pulling from inside this function. Somehow, we're still pulling this. Why is that?
Because of hoisting.
Nope. You could say because of hoisting. It's because this isn't defined anywhere else, and therefore it's looking outside its space, right? It's going up and outside its space. If I take my function, and I say L, hopefully this is going to work the way I want it to. And I say function, document, sorry, document dot body. And I call it, I hope I'm not screwing up here. I had this all like orchestrated on how to show it. Nope, I screwed it up. Let me reference my notes real quick. Because what I want to demonstrate to you is how we get that context in and out. Go ahead.
Is this showing up when you're calling the function HHH as window because you're calling it, but if you were to invoke it, it would show up as reference the function?
It should show, right? So I played with it for a while last night because what I wanted to do was give you a step-by-step into it. I completely just choked on that. So give me 1 second, if you don't mind, please. Because what I want to do is lead you down this path, right? And so you can see how your context is flip-flopping when you're going in and out of objects, right? When you're processing something inside a space, that this becomes that, if that makes sense to you. And I'm just having brain fart after brain fart, so I'm just going to suck it up and say, hey, I'm stinking right now, so bear with me. And the internet stinks too. Do you guys have bad internet?
I'm using my phone.
This is really sad.
I don't even try anymore. I just use my phone every time.
Of course, the time I try to fly without my notes. Silly boy. It's a freaking document. Like taking forever. Anytime I report this, IT will come over and I'll move a file from one room to another and tell me I'm nuts. They'll move a 500 gig file from Berks Hall to here. And be like, well, there's no problem. Why don't you move it from Google? One second. All right. Let's try and do a quick rewind. Go ahead. All right. So just to reiterate, we're out here. This out here, right, is our window. Therefore, if we establish a variable and call it 1, and we put the value of 100 at it, and we hit enter, and I put this dot 1, will that give me that value of 100? I'm in the window space. I'm in the execution context of right, the window. What's that going to give me? Why? Explain to me why. That's the most important part. You understand why?
Because by doing bar 1 equals 100, are we assigning it to a global? Would that make it?
We're assigning it to the window. Yes, the
Right,
global,
window.
right? So it should be 100.
Because when you overcall this, you're calling the window, and what's there is the 100 that you assigned.
Right. And so kind of makes you wonder if you would be able to do window dot 1, doesn't it? They're the same thing, aren't they?
Yes.
Right? So at this point, think about it like this. This is aligned to window. So this represents window. Make sense?
Yeah.
But they're unequal now because you haven't defined this as something else, correct?
What's that? No, that's not true. We don't define this. Right?
Would
We
strict
don't
mode
define
change
it.
that, though?
What's that?
Would strict mode change that though for the for this? If it was inside a function or something?
Oops. Is it underscore strict?
You got an N in there, in strict.
Oh, I did. Thank you. Maybe we can't call it in here. I don't know if it's called or not. We can figure that out by doing what? Just trying to define a variable, right? Without putting var on it. So obviously uStrict was not defined in there, accepted, or it would have yelled at us for that, correct? Let's just build slowly here. So first of all, we have this, and we know that this one, right, is there. We know that this, currently, its context is window, meaning when we use the word this out here, this is the same as saying window dot 1. That makes sense? If we go ahead and we create a function called bar, let's go along with whatever. And inside it, right, we put console.log, well, yeah, this. And we say bar, we should get window. We're good there. Because right now, what's happening, bar is a part of the function, right? If we say window dot bar, called it out, right? And we got this. Fair enough? You keep stepping here.
Now you have to put the parentheses function, right?
If we don't put the function, right, what's going to happen to it?
That isn't assigned, so it should be in the file.
Say that again.
If you just did that without the parentheses for window.bar, you would just return a undefined, correct?
Window.bar. So
Dot bar.
.bar. What we're doing now is calling the function, and it should yield the function if I'm correct, which it did. There's our function,
Oh, okay.
right?
Right.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
So let's go a step further. Yes, sir. All right, let's back up. Point I'm trying to make right now, if we look at bar, right, that function is actually, it's owned by the global space. Right here it is. Right? It's a part of the global space. Just like if we go and look for one, and remember this now, this will start, right? This is overwhelming. First time you pop open that thing, you're like, holy sh, but it actually starts to become exciting because you realize this is where I can go find stuff.
Yeah. So you can't just any word. You can't just you have things like this, window, bar, stuff that's in the global space.
Right. We couldn't say, right, window dot poo function, right? Because we don't have it. Does that make sense? Does that make sense? Right? And right now, because this and that function sitting right up here in this global space, it's in that context, correct? And same with our variable one. Right here. And we can even see the value of it because we put it there, right? So, and what's cool in JavaScript, yes, we can argue that it's not cool, but to me it's cool, right? In JavaScript, when you create a function or an object, not so much not a variable, even though yes, arguably a variable is an object, right? But when you purposely go and create like an object, you literally almost create the entire copy of the JavaScript library and attach it to that object. So now all this functionality, right, is exclusive to that object. And as you start to learn execution context and it starts to make more sense to you, that makes even more sense to you, right? Because you're sending this variable, right? It's kind of like you raised this kid for 18 years and you're sending them off to college, hoping you've put enough variables and functions into their object, right? You know, so they can function like an object or whatever. And so what's really cool, what's really cool is every time you create an object or like a function in JavaScript, it actually just passes this information along, not populated information, but I mean like things like array, you can, all the functionality of JavaScript goes along with it. Default functionality. Now, here's where context in this really starts to come into play for you. If I come up here and I say var, just create an object. This time we're going to create an object. Okay? Inside it, we're going to put two function. I'm cheating off my notes. Console.log. This. I can't help myself. That'll look nice. So what am I doing with this code here? Simplest forms. Don't think it through too much. What am I doing with the code? We got to get a cover button, a button cover. You know what I mean? We got to get it to that point that we can get it going and my foot doesn't hit it. What is foo function? First of all, what is this? It's a dead giveaway right there.
Really?
What is it? Right. Creating an object, right?
Or is it a variable called object?
Nope, it's an object. Dead giveaway is this. And pretty much the safe answer in JavaScript, if somebody says, what am I creating? You look at them very wittily and say, an object, because you're usually right. So, what is this?
That's a function.
Is it?
Called function?
Yeah.
Will we call it a function now? Oh, let's be correct. What would we call it?
What?
An object is also a function.
Constructor?
No.
The best I can come up with is the value, key value pair.
Yeah, and I'm just being kind of a dicky-do about it, to be honest with you, right? What do we call a function inside an object? There you go. Right? So I'm just trying to get your right nomenclature, right? Your
What was the
Does that answer?
method.
Method. Okay.
It's a method, right? It's a method
Got it.
inside.
Yeah.
And so since we have a method inside our object,
Method,
right?
not function.
Huh?
Who is the method, not function? Is that correct?
Who is the method in that function?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
in that object.
Okay.
Yeah?
Yeah, I got it.
All right. So at this point, if we go ahead in here and let's just go ahead and execute it for shits and giggles. Let's enter it in. It's sitting in there now, right? And we say obj dot foo. What do we get now?
Undefined. We didn't return.
What's our context now? Nope.
now? If you go to your console, you should have something posted, right?
Something what?
You should have this information on your console.
Well, if I type this now, what am I going to get?
You should get one, shouldn't you? Yeah.
What?
You should window.
But if I type this, right, which is saying, hey, object, I'm going inside to your method and then console log the value of this, that's what I get. Why?
This isn't global.
Hang
Change your context.
hang on online. Hang on. Raise your hand verbally.
You're getting the function itself because you're calling it, not invoking it. You invoke it, you get this console log because you're only calling it, sort of just returns it.
Say it again.
So because you're calling the function and not invoking it, it's just giving you the function itself. Whereas if you invoked it, it would console log this.
Nope. And that's all right. And
Yeah.
Don, actually, yeah. Who was first, Chris or Don?
I don't
Chris?
know.
Chris, go ahead. What do you think? Look at it closely. Go type it in your machine. Type it in your console. Look at it. Play with it. This guy's good.
So my thought was that because it's with it, this is within the function, it returned an undefined. This isn't it's not part of the global object. And
I wish I had glow sticks when he's talking. I think you got it. Don?
I was just saying that in this case, this is the context of this is now changed. More or less what Chris was saying. Since the context is changed, it doesn't belong to the window itself. It's within the method.
Thank you. So a couple things I heard. I heard a little bit of confusion, which is fine. What we were seeing really was, we thought we were seeing was that, right? Which was just calling the function, right? Getting the actual function itself. But in reality, when I call this, I'm calling it, I'm sitting in the window calling this. When I call the object, right? So now when that object, when anything in that object gets executed, it opens up its own execution context, right? It opens up its own space and time. And it can reach backwards out into the global, right? It could reach up. Let's leave it at that. But when I go to use this inside there, it now refers to the space that it's in, which is now that method foo. Does that make sense or not?
Yes.
It's all right. This is the hard stuff, right? Like, talk through it. This, if you can understand this, you'll be good. Go ahead.
So you're telling me we call the object foo, the function foo, object foo in the console. It has to populate the space of the object with foo, the function foo.
So, say that again, Jimmy. Try to say it a little differently.
Maybe.
Help me. No, yeah.
So object foo, when we entered object function foo into the console, the object that we assigned earlier populates inside the function foo.
So think about it like, yeah, think about it like this, dude. What we made earlier, and correct me, shut me up and take me another direction if I'm not answering your question. So what you're asking is, we made this earlier.
Yes.
So when we made it, I haven't cleared memory yet.
Correct.
So when I made it, it's there. It's still sitting there, even though we don't see it anymore, correct?
Right.
So then your question was, again, when we called this, what we were really doing is saying object foo execute this function.
Mm-hmm.
You're seeing it correctly. What happened when we said object, right, foo in this function, we know for the most part, especially inside an object itself, that when that executes, it creates its own space. Well, this is really just a reference to the space you're in. So think about it like this. If I'm out in the hallway, always the window, right? It's the window object. So if you say to me, hey, Brian, this, when hallway, if I step into 128, hey, Brian, this, 128. Right? If I come back out in the hallway and I'm headed to 119 and you're like this, hey, hallway. I go on 119, this, 119.
So I have an interesting parallel to it.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say the window is a submarine radar.
Mhm.
and the submarine on the radar is this. Every time this wants to find like a buried treasure, which would be the other objects, it would ping and say this, whatever's near it is the treasure.
Mhm.
This is what we're looking for.
Mhm.
Does this
Yes.
make sense? Okay.
Take the word, and you're kind of doing this, right?
Mhm.
Take the word. Do you know how this really evolved? And this isn't just JavaScript. This is programming across the board, right? You will find this in many languages. You'll find context in many languages. What you won't find is the magic of JavaScript in many languages. And what I mean by that is PHP, process done, right?
Mhm.
ASP, process done. Python, process done. JavaScript, process, oh, wait a little. Here's a few things I put out there for you to do. Right, awesome thing. Awesome point to right, think about. But it's really funny when, and I choose to believe this, right? I'm not saying I read this from the official programmer's manual of, every programmer in the world subscribed to 99% said this, but this is what I choose to believe, and I really do believe it. This came about from a human perspective in programming because we needed a way to control context, because context, as you get deeper into programming, you'll learn context and, these things that we're talking about. It's imperative that you understand them, because once you understand this, what we're talking about now, especially those of you going on in school, when you get to programming whatever, blah, 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 400, and you start talking about memory space and memory heap and right, and different things, because you understand what we're talking about, you will quickly just, oh, no shit, wow, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, it'll just start to make sense for you. The word this, my understanding of what I choose to subscribe was that whoever the group was that decided, they were basically like, look, context works like this. I'm standing in 126 right now, and we're having a conversation, right? And I want to start referring to things. This desk. This whiteboard. Ken comes in and he goes, what do you mean the smart board is not working? This smart board has been not working for 6 months. Everybody in this room knows what this is, right? And this is more of a direct this, but it's a result of this, if that makes, right? Being in your context allows you to refer to things as this. Now you might have to say this whiteboard, but what you don't have to say is the whiteboard in room 129, right? Does that make sense? That's this. In short, that's how that's why the word this was chosen, as opposed to your current context. You know what I mean? Because us as programmers, right, the smarter we get, the smarter we like to look, and the more difficult we make sure, is what it comes down to. Now, I don't know how many of you experienced this yet, but for me, even still yet in my career, and even today, there are times where words like execution context, I get that we need to attach a word to it, but damn it, do we need to make it sound so like Einstein and whatever? You know what I mean? That it's like almost just the name freaks you out and you don't want to learn it, kind of thing, right? That's freaking programmers for you. So there's a couple different things that we can do with this. I'm just going to numerically, so I don't have to keep cleaning. Those of you following me, I'm just going to numerically keep building up objects, okay? Let's talk about this. Once you can establish context, and understand, the more you understand context, right? Again, you don't go to the beach, stand on the edge of the wave, right, of the water, and take one leap and you're in 10 feet of water swimming. You have to work your way out, right? And so that's kind of what you're doing with context and things like that. What's really cool is you become more confident as a programmer. You start to realize things like this become a powerful tool in establishing how you're going to run conditions and right and understand things and know what's going on, and right, it becomes really a useful tool. You'll be surprised at how much simplicity you actually use, because you'd say, well, that really doesn't make that much sense for me, but now I'm going to introduce you to something a little more interesting. Because we have context, do we feel like we got this context down pretty good? We think we know what we're doing there? We have this object 2, right? Oh shit, I got to recreate it. I screwed it up. Let's do object 3, sorry. Object 3, this window. In my function, I want to go ahead and put A, comma, B, comma, C. And all I want to do, those are called what? What did I just put in there? Close. It's the other side of an argument. It's your wife's position.
Parameters?
Yes. Your wife gives you parameters and you give her arguments, right? Sorry, I don't mean to be, I'm married, I can say that. Right? So we get that. We can start passing stuff into that function now as well. I'll call it up. There it is. But it went through. It didn't. There it is. Now we could go ahead, and if we wanted to, we could start passing stuff in as well to this, right? We could even say window. I believe it'll work like this. I'm going to give it a shot. So I took window in there. I'm going to go for object 4. I'm just going to keep building on these, right? 4. I'm going to say A is equal to window. And through 3, I'm going to pass in window. Right? So point is, a lot of times you're going to want to do different things. And if you understand that you can leverage this, and the reason that this becomes important is because there's going to come a point where you're going to start to do some pretty crazy things. You're going to come in, you're going to do stuff like, we'll do object 5 now, sorry, but it's what it is. Actually, let's recreate 3 to 5.
I have a question then.
Yep, hang on one second. 3 to 5. And we're not going to get too deep on this, but I'm going to introduce you to 2 things that you're going to learn to actually love in JavaScript. And we're not going to go over the top with them. But C5, I'm receiving parameters in here, right? There's one cleared so I can get it to the top. I'm going to pass in just a quick array. Come on, Brian. Why do I keep doing that? I keep making the same mistake over again, like marriage. Jason, am I into that?
Yeah.
We are on 4, right? Or was it 5? 5, thank you. 5, window foo, right? We know what, come on. Really? You're going to take it away from me? You're going to punish me for that. It's going to punish me for that. Window 5. Go ahead and we'll just pass this in and see what we get. So we get a false because we know 5 is set to that, right? Where it says, right. Window 5, object 5 foo, we're calling the same thing, except this time we're going to go ahead and say apply. Go look at it. We're on 5, right? We'll start going in here at some point. We can see that our script, we can see our 2 scopes, by the way. Our scopes are, right, basically our script scope is what most browsers will call it. And then our global scope, right? So in other words, what's out there in our universe, what's out beyond us. And this is what we call our, anybody? Outer context. Right. So again, really good to know, because if you're coming in here and you're looking, you're troubleshooting and things like that, and you're like, I should be able to reach that. I should be able to reach that. I should be able to reach that. And you come in and you realize that your global really isn't in reach. Then you have an issue, right? Then not an issue, but you need to rethink how it is, what you're doing is what it comes down to. But when we use apply, and we're not going to go too deep into apply, but what I'm trying to point out to you is when we use apply, what we're able to do with apply, which is pretty cool, is we're able to actually have that function act like it is, right, forever more what it is. And it gets kind of interesting, because then we can start to do things like binding.
That was my question.
Yes. So now, I mean, if you want, we'll dip in there real quick. Don't get scared. Don't get freaked out, right? We're still focused on scope. So don't worry about, right, what's going on here. But let's say we took apply and turned it to bind. We passed in window. What our bind should have done, I did something wrong, right? But what our bind will do is it'll watch window activity against itself now and actually consider it, right, like a watcher, like waiting for it to do things to it. Go ahead.
A question about this. So would like the best use case for this, would it be something like scrolling through objects that have data, like JSON, like a JSON string, and like say it's names and then personal information. So like scrolling through something like that, pulling multiple data points out, or like the same data point for different people.
So let's do this. I think I hear your question.
Too much of a derail.
Nope, it's all right, because it totally ties to this. Let me go in here. And actually, let's do it like this, because I know I have buttons. Let's go to 403, which is coming out for you. We'll have things to play with in here. So, right. So now we have these buttons in here. look in here. What we do out here, right, is we build, and tell me if I'm not answering your question, but if you look, we have a function here. And what we're doing with this function is we're starting to build up our application interface on our little project that we're doing. And we go ahead and we put header, main, and footer. And then we go ahead and what we want to do is we've laid out in the nav bar, you can see we've done our menu builder, right? And we've put menus into it. And those menus are right here. If we look at them, we can see what we have in there, right, are these links. They're link items. And they each have a data dash, in this case, data dash attribute. We can put data dash dirty underwear, right? What that attribute data dash is saying is, I am a piece of data. And if it calls me and it asks for data, you specify what piece of data you're calling for, and I'll return it. Let me tell you, one of the most amazing things to happen in web development, because up until that, guess where we put all our data? We would sneak it away into CSS. So you would open up a freaking link and it would have like 40 classes to it. And really only one of them was a real class and the rest were data points. But we would find places to hide data because it's a long process, trust me, getting to where we are today. But what's cool is now, if we look at that link, we have a class of nav-link. This one's active. We'll come down here. That one's not active, but we still have Nash, right? Each of these, its parent, the LI parent, has nav item. And then we each, you can tell here, right? Each one has its own data dash dash. It's basically, we treat it like a unique ID. So we can identify specifically, right? So we come over to write our JavaScript. And we get in here and we put those nav links in there. We get that all taken care of. Beautiful. We have that in there, set our background color. We go ahead and we append our header, our main, and our footer to our body. And then we come down here and we say, wait a minute. I want to create this variable called links. And what I want to do by creating this variable called links is I want to get all the elements by tag name. What does that mean? Oh, it's in there. Sorry. It's out of scope. I might be able to grab it. Let me see. Yeah, and all it's going to do is return the function itself. So what happens here, I can show you what happens here. I'm saying create a variable called links, get elements by tag name. We could use query selector, we could use a couple different things, right? But what's really happening here is I'm going to say demo links. I'm going to create a new variable because we're talking about it, and we're going to run that exact line of code again. And this time, what it's going to come up with for me is demo links. And when I hit it, what we end up with is what's called an HTML collection. 5 links, home. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It went out and it gathered all 5 of them. And what it gathered on them, look at that, holy crap, all kinds of information. But one of the coolest things that it gathered on them that it didn't used to gather for us is right here, this thing called data set. And if you look at data set, right, we can see that we actually have that information and it's stored in that HTML5 element, active. Right now we're looking at active, right? And because we're looking at active, we can see all the information around it about active. We can see here that our class list, right? We have navlink, active, value, navlink, active. So it's giving us the full, like if we ever want to match, so what jQuery is doing, yeah, or you ever notice like when you do a kind of like a query on CSS or something in jQuery, and you say jQuery, parentheses, quotes, nav-link, space active, it's looking for those things, right? That's how it's looking. It's looking in here. We have our data set, which we just talked about. We have information that we may never even want to use, right? Need to use. We know when it's active and when it's not active. We're not using active right now. If we use the active attribute, we could actually, that would, right, change and tell us when it's active and not active. So anyway, tons of information. And by the way, for those of you in multimedia right now, right, some of the things we are talking about, position and processing, right, getting that information and knowing like where an item is sitting, offset left, right? This is where all our information is coming from. And when you look, the majority of this is what? Null. But as I explained to you earlier, one of the cool things with JavaScript is instead of just selectively saying, oh, I'll give you this piece of information, I'll give you this ability, I'll give you that. Here, son, take everything I've learned in life, go on and be yourself. You know, and that's what's really cool about JavaScript to me. So anyway, we have these 5, right? We got that length property. And so to his question about this, I think I'm a long-winded answer, but I think I am answering it, which is now we know that we have this array that we just looked at of five elements, 0 through 4. For var I equals, that should be let, equals 0. It's okay that it's var. That's old school though. It just shows my age. As long as I is less than link's length, and then increment I 1, 1, 1, right? Well, it captures into memory link's length 5. So I starts at 0, goes through once, right? We get the whole for loop thing, yes? But because we're in this code block now, what's really cool is in this for statement, it's going to go through each one of that list. And when it does, it literally kind of creates its own execution context, its own space. And because it creates its own space, what for does is it passes in the whole object, right? That's an object, that's an object, that's an object, and that's an object. Which means now I can be really, you know, dynamic about it. And I can basically say, link clicked this. And so what I'm doing, right, is we're putting on the on-click, sorry, I've jumped ahead a little bit there, right? I'm putting on an on-click event is what I'm doing. And I'm saying for each one of these objects, I want you to add an event listener. And I want that event listener to be click. And when it's clicked, I want you to kick off this function. You notice I'm not passing any information into that function. But because this function is happening inside its own object space, it has its own execution context. Because it has its own execution context, the ceiling of this is nothing more than this, right? So what's cool about it is I can capture that whole object there. And that's what I do with this. And I say, kick off the function with this. We go find our function called link clicked. We know we're getting an object in. We say console log just so we can see it, right? So if I console log, link click, there's number 1. If I come over here, object, which is the thing that was passed in, data set, destination. Object, data set, destination. This begins and ends right here. And because this is our context now, I can just say this dot anything in here. Where that's really powerful, and it's okay if you don't fully get it, some people don't, but where that's really powerful is we now have 4 lines of code that can act on behalf of hundreds of lines of code, right? And all because of this. All because we can say, Jimmy, go to room 128. When you get there, I'll give you your directions. Take this and take that and take this and take this, right? Instead of saying, Jimmy, go to room 128, get the 4th table, get this, right? Kind of like that's the power of this. Yes. I thought you had something. It's probably one of the most powerful things in JavaScript, in my opinion, because of the fact of how it allows you to write. And if you learn it early and learn it well, the way you learn to write will become very effective and efficient, quick, like you'll learn much faster. You'll learn much, much faster. I come down here, I say create, right? Create a string, animate, zoom in. I take the data destination. I'm just going to use that as a value. What the hell? Why not? Was clicked, append that, right? Concatenate that in between here, make it H1s. And I come here and I say document get element by ID, which is main, which is our main stage, our main work area. And I say enter HTML equals this string. And we could call that string anything, right? But this string, and I say repeat 20 times. And so that's a JavaScript function, by the way, built-in JavaScript function, and hence we get this repeat 20 times. What's really cool about functions like repeat and stuff like that, you learn them, honestly, use them in the most smartest places after a while. Like, you're so glad you learned it because you hardly ever use it on an actual production implementation of something, right? But you use it every freaking day because you get sick of fishing for content. So you just creatively make your, like in this case, you creatively, because truly functional testing means, as silly as it sounds to some people, in my opinion, if you were on my team at eBay, it meant don't show me something I can't scroll when we know it's going to scroll every time after it's released in production. Because the second you don't show me is the second QA is calling me at 7 o'clock at night because we failed and we have to get through QA and get through security and get through pen and get through performance by 12 o'clock tonight so we can do our release on this patch. Don't you dare be that person that didn't go to the damn page and fill it with enough text to scroll it, only to find out that when you scroll it, it kicks off a function and it kills the whole page. So you always fill content, right? You always fill your areas is the point I'm making. Well, what's cool is in your efforts to become a great developer, it's because of those types of things that you start to learn little silly things like that. It really is. This is, it really, it comes down to being able to leverage something that's available to you in such a way that empowers you to take a single function and reuse it many, many times. It allows you a way to test where you are in context so you know whether you want to execute something. It makes a better security developer out of you as well. The other thing with this that you'll start to learn, how many of you ever heard of memory leaks in JavaScript? Can you tell me exactly what the hell they're talking about with memory leaks in JavaScript? Is like, are you putting values in and they're coming out the other side of the RAM? Is that what's going on?
Things that are put in memory and held there and then released at inappropriate times. It wasn't flushed.
There you go. Right. Good boy, Tom. Memory leaks really aren't leaks. They really aren't. The problem, and you don't really have issues with them until you get into like Sony. When we did Sony's website, holy crap, man, we had memory problems all over the place because we were doing all kinds of stupid, background and this and that, blah blah blah. But memory leaks, what they really are is memory misuse. Because what you're doing is you're assigning things to memory, right? And then you're forgetting about it, and you're leaving them there. We'll do that with a for statement, right? Or a while. And do that to a couple thousand objects. And next thing you know it, right, you're starting to, do we all know what garbage collection is? Anybody know what garbage collection is? Does anybody know the fundamental, right, just the fundamental way that memory and computers work? Can anybody explain that to me? Memory as, right, as you would think of memory, and it's not just web, right? It's computers, period. Don, you want to explain?
I kind of heard the question and I kind of didn't, so.
All right. For the sake of time, go ahead.
So memory and the way computers work is basically, so you have a limited amount of memory and the computer assigns it in binary. I don't know if this is what you're looking for. It assigns it in binary, and then over time it like assigns pointers, which are like variables. And over time, if you don't collect and like refresh the information, it just stays there and you run out of memory.
Okay, so let's remember to lead. And yes, you're right. Think about this. When we start Microsoft Word, is that running off our hard drive?
No, it's running out of the RAM.
As a matter of fact, what's really funny is if you read licenses on software, most software, I'm not sure anymore today, but back in the disk days for sure, I could have Microsoft Word installed on 10,000 computers and have one license. And as long as one computer ran at a time, I was within compliance, right? Because the licenses were defined by being in memory, meaning running in memory. Well, there's this process where it's called memory allocation. JavaScript does a great job at it because it goes out and says, just give me my damn memory, right? Give me what I need. Reserves these spots. But think about it. If there's not a process, so we have a process to get memory. We only have so much memory. There needs to be a process to, right, reclaim memory. A good coder will always, and we'll learn how to do this, pull what we don't need in memory out of memory again. And we don't necessarily pull it out. What we do is we flag it. And we flag it for this thing. And honestly, it's funny because it is kind of like this. It's called garbage collection. So essentially, there's this trash truck that drives along memory blocks and says, you ever see Inside Out, the Disney movie? Where they're like taking memory, the balls, the different colored balls. If you haven't seen that, you should. It's a great movie. But these guys are walking around the memory, the long-term memory, and they're grabbing all the gray balls and putting them into a wheelbarrow, and then they dump them into the abyss kind of thing. And that's what's funny is that's garbage collection, right? That's what your computer does. It goes through your memory and it looks for, hey, I'm no longer needed. I'm no longer great. Memory heap. There we go. Right, your memory heap is your available, right? And you can. It's an interesting process. Learning these contexts. I know it seems silly, but honestly, you get your head around context. Execution context, lexical, you will find yourself flying through JavaScript. You will. Because I honestly believe, and I've heard, and it's not, I didn't say this, I heard somebody say it at WMAX once. And I think it's one of the times I was really motivated to come home and like start learning a little more computer science and understand. He said, 6 years of learning JavaScript made him feel like an absolute idiot once he learned the process, lexical, right, environment, execution context. Once he learned those two things and understood them, what he learned in 6 years in JavaScript, he learned in 6 months in JavaScript because it freed how he understood what was going on. And when you understand what's right, you know, honestly, at the end of the day, it's kind of like, you know what to say and what not to say when you're sitting in the dean's office, and you know what to say and not say when you're sitting at the bar with your friends, right? And it's that kind of theory, right? It's that kind of questions. 403, I don't know if I turned it on yet. I think I wanted to run through it one more time before I turn it on. It's ready to be turned on. So 403, 402, I'll be reviewing that and giving feedback. Hopefully you guys choose to engage for the last couple of weeks of class. That would be awesome. Would be really awesome if you watch those videos and then did these exercises, because I bet you go at these exercises just a little bit differently, like what you're learning. I promise you this, those of you who have done 402 already, I mean, honestly, if you wanted to, you could get it done in 10 minutes. It's not the idea, right? It's not the idea. That padding that I put there for you is to take the other information that I'm providing to you and put it together. That's the idea. So it's up to you to get your money's worth, right? Fair enough? Yes, sir.
Why? Never mind.
No, go ahead. I'm okay.
I'm concerned for you, Brad. I'm afraid you might get carpal tunnel using for loops instead of for each. For loop you use with wings click this. You can just use for each to look over everything, right? Instead of for.
You could.
Because you're going wing stop time.
Yeah, there's a lot of things you could, right? There's a lot of different approaches you could take to it. But also remember, just like that time you thought it with the, right?
That's true.
Right?
Yep.
So ask that question differently next time.
Okay.
Fair enough. Pompous little son of a bitch. And I challenge you anytime. You know what, Tyler? You know what's funny? I do appreciate that you tried to find those things. Don and Chris, see you later. Good night.
All right, catch you later.
Thank you, Brian.
Can they hear me? They're both like staring into the.
See y'all Tuesday.
There's Chris.
All right,
That's
sounds
Don just dropped. No. Yeah, Jimmy, I heard you. I'm sorry.
Can you use a console log?
You can, but it gets so junky.
Right. You want me to submit like just class notes?
Yeah, whatever.
Okay.
Yeah. What? Just show me you were there, right? That's what I'm worried about. For responsive, I think it's fine if you guys use Trinket for responsive. The problem for me is I've got to blow it up, then blow it up big enough for you to see the code, and then it throws off that iframe in Trinket and so on. That's why I went over to console, because I think when I'm putting it up here, it's easier for you to see. If you go look, I did take all the code from responsive and updated my Trinket. So if you want to copy and paste that over so you have it to play with, you don't have to, but I'm just saying it's there. Other questions?
Yeah, I have a quick one actually.
We're gonna talk about it.
Anyway, this might be another smart ass question, so stick around. Go ahead, Chris.
So this whole context thing, you can pull a whole bunch of information and everything like that with it.
Yes.
So is it like it's an Ajax call and like the JSON information and all that, like 6 of one and a dozen of the other, as which method you use to pull your information? Do you know what I mean?
No, I don't. I mean, I hear you, but I don't know exactly what you're asking. So try that again.
Is throwing an Ajax call into your script the same as pulling information through using the this method and
Oh no, two separate things, buddy.
because the information, it looked like it showed up sort of the same way.
Oh sure, and we're glad about that, right? We're actually happy about that. We want to use as much similar syntax and methodology as possible so we have less confusion in learning, correct?
Yeah,
But that's so once we get the data in, right, we can use the data then in our application, in our execution context, right, in global or whatever. But short of that, Ajax really, it's not like using this or whatever, because what's kind of funny, if you want to get hippie about it, right, and bongish about it, Ajax is the Freebird kind of way of saying, I'm not happy in this window. I want to reach out to Jupyter and get some information from there. Does that make sense?
kind of.
Right. It's basically what you're doing. You're using Ajax to import, to bring information in to your execution context. And what's really cool with Ajax, if you really think about it, the way we write an object and we put methods in it, can we do that with Ajax as well? Can we actually bring in new methods into our...
So I
would explore that one.
I don't know.
I would explore that
I haven't
one.
explored it enough to know that.
Right? Well, imagine how cool that would be. That would be kind of like a step in AI, wouldn't it? Because at that point, we'd be allowed to let our software grow without us updating it.
No.
Put the bong down. All right, punk. Go shovel snow.
The sun care most of it. Please.
Yeah, I know. Shut up. I know all about living there, jerk.
All right, have a good weekend.
Catch you later, brother. You too.
All right, see ya.